Don't put all the fruit in it and stuff. So this is dreamy.
That's how I like my spirits too. Like, I treat myself with a really well-made cocktail every now and again, but really I like things neat.
Yeah. I think for me, I generally, we were talking off air a little bit about how I was saying that I can tell the difference now between something that's really well made and maybe something that's not, there's not quite so much love put into it. I don't know how to put language to it, but also I do like to drink it neat, mostly as I'm learning so I can understand the flavor profiles. But also generally speaking, I don't like ice cold stuff anyway. So if there's ice in it, it drives me nutty. And then even if it's shaken with ice, sometimes I'm like, it's too cold. I feel like you can't taste everything.
It's true.
Unless it's like just less cold. It doesn't have to be room temperature, but
yeah,
this is quite nice.
I like to get it cold and like drink it slow and let it warm up, and then you can kind of have this whole spectrum of flavors as it warms up.
Right.
Even with wine too.
It does come down to the experience, I think. It can be as simple as, although this is a pretty badass experience. I'm like, we
in a
could
castle.
just be sitting in a castle, in a turret. Is that what this is? Is a turret?
Yeah.
With a nice window out to the city and a plant and some cocktails. This doesn't
tiny
suck.
table full of
yes,
cocktails.
It does not suck. Yeah, are you getting a picture of all the cocktails? Okay, so let's go back to Peru. Mm-hmm. And you're sitting at the table, and you're both from Spokane.
Oh, yeah. And so we were both really blown away. And actually that afternoon I had found a place to live, and it happened that it was like 2 blocks from where she lived. And so, yeah, we just instantly became friends. And I think later that week she took me out to the distillery to meet the distiller, Nati Gordillo, and tried the Pisco. And yeah, I lived really close to her, so we always hung out in Lima. She has 2 small kids, and I would just go hang out with them all the time. And we really created like a sisterhood. And it was a few months later, and I had left Lima to go live in Cusco, and she had something come up with her partnership. She had owned this brand. She founded the brand something like 8 years prior. It was already exported to the U.S., all of those things. And her business partner needed to step out of the arrangement. And so she thought about me, and she thought about Nati, the distiller, and creating this like 3-woman team. Since I'm a bartender from the U.S. and I'm really familiar with the U.S. market, that's not something that either of them had.
Right.
Nati's a producer from Peru. She's the woman who does all of the pisco from grape until distillate. So
wow.
She is a huge part of the company. And then Meg, the founder of the company, she does all of the like export and import, the logistics, and is kind of like the head of the company. And she thought, like a portion of the company should go to me, that's a bartender and can create with the product and have a rapport already with people that we want to be serving our product.
Right.
It was kind of just really interesting timing and really, I don't know, like,
meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That was laid out.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. That's starting to become a theme in my life right now. It's like meeting people who are going through experiences, and even myself kind of going through those experiences. Or maybe it's just that I'm starting to pay attention a little more. Yeah. But yeah, for sure. I totally believe in that.
I think so, because you can look back on other experiences and be like, oh, so that led to this, that led to this, that's why I'm here today. And it's kind of like raises the question of, really, is this all pre-arranged or what?
Yeah,
it's
I think
wild.
At the very least, there's something bigger than us that's at least taking all the pieces that are like getting thrown out there and kind of unfolding them in an orderly fashion. I tend to be a very controlling, or at least have been previously, like the square peg round hole person. Like, no, it has to be this way and in this timing, and it's got to look just like this. And the thing is like, yes, Catherine's always like, stop rowing. And it can happen. Like, there is something people generally will say, like, hard work. That's what's going to get to it. You just got to work really hard. And yes, you can get there if you work really hard. I think you can get there and maybe even somewhere else that's better if you just soften up a little bit and be like, okay, this is kind of where I'm going with it. This is my dream. This is, and now let's just going to see how it unfolds. But that's just a new thing for me to understand that that's probably a better way to do it. And also probably happens faster,
and less painfully.
Right. It's definitely a more of a winding road, but it seems if you just let go a little bit, you get there a little bit quicker.
I absolutely agree. I think I've always been the same way, kind of like forcing my way through things of like, this is going to happen. And then the second that I'm like, okay, just free fall into it. Maybe stop trying to be like this bull that's like plowing through things and is so rough with everything. Just step back, breathe, and listen to what everything is telling you, and maybe like just tip into it and see what happens there. And like definitely in Portland, I was it was really awesome, like working at all these different bars and really learning how to bartend, like deep into it. And that's an incredible experience. It's given me incredible experience. But the second that I was just like, what happens if you just cut the tie and go this way?
Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. I had two people yesterday at this conference tell me, like, on a particular topic, like, just literally, Danielle, just cut the string and just let it happen.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about Portland, because as I mentioned earlier, probably offline and on, and everybody knows this, that my visit into the spirits world is so very new, and I'm just learning, and I'm suddenly it's just something that I'm seeing happen. Having Danny as a friend as well, who's in the industry, and he's doing a lot of really cool stuff and's got amazing relationships. I'm like, oh my God, this is actually a thing. Experiences around spirits, and people who haven't been there just think, oh, I go into a bar and I buy a drink and I walk out, and there's just so much more to be able to experience. Is Portland, like, from people outside of Portland, we're like, oh, yes, go and have some coffee, or that's a great place to go meet people with beards or whatever. Yeah. But I never hear I never hear anything like, oh, Portland's a great place to go if you're into spirits and cocktails, and there's great cocktail bars. But again, I'm going to preface that by saying it's because it hasn't been on my radar. But is that a big thing in Portland?
Yes, you should definitely put it on your radar. Portland has, I don't know about now. I've been gone for 5 years now. But always Portland had the most breweries
that was
per capita.
I knew beer, but
then there's also stemming from that, there's tons of craft distilleries. So always in the bars we were working with really local products, because all of the distillers would come in and like do events or want to get their product in our hands. But there's actually a distillery row in Portland that you can visit and just go like door to door, kind of like hop to distilleries. On top of that, man, there's so many interesting spirits there. There's one outside of the city.
There's a culture around it.
Full.
There, yeah.
Yep. Just like, I think probably because I've always been inside of it. But I always think of Portland as like, the mecca for craft, even coffee, but also beer, wine, spirits. Like
very like craft focused.
Cocktails. There's
I'm learning to appreciate that.
Yeah, there's really amazing food and drink to be had there. Absolutely.
What age were you when you moved to Portland?
18.
Okay. So you grew up in Spokane. Mm-hmm. You ended up in Portland. Mm-hmm. Where did you... Clearly you had a love of like South American culture, Latin American culture. Like, where did that come from?
That came from in Spokane high schools. We had to study a language. We had to take a language course. And so I had heard that Spanish was the easiest and was like, great, I'll take Spanish. Yeah. I think the other options were like French and maybe Japanese or something.
Right.
So I was like, Spanish it is. So
I think I may have had that same experience.
So in 10th grade, I start my language requirements, and I was like really shy, but really loved my Spanish class, and my teacher was great. And I just continued all throughout high school. I just kept taking Spanish because I liked it so much. And mostly I was reflecting on this the other day, but I think it was kind of like living in Spokane. My school district was actually like outside of Spokane in a more rural area, so it's not like I was inside of the city much. So it's kind of as if studying Spanish was like my vessel to kind of like fuel my imagination of what it must be like in these countries south of here, you know, Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. And I was always really fascinated with the Americas, not as much in Europe.
Right.
I've always just been very fixated. And I think in Spanish class, you read all sorts of literature from all over the Spanish-speaking world. And I always enjoyed like Borges from Argentina, Cortázar from Argentina, and yeah, just a lot of Latin American authors. And I think there was probably, I know in high school we had, in my Spanish class, we watched a soap opera, and it was definitely based somewhere in the or telenovela.
Yeah, I was going to say telenovela.
Like, let's be real.
Which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
I am fascinated with watching them because it's a language. So my Spanish is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not beautiful. My grammar is kind of sucky. My ex-husband's from Spain, and my kids speak Spanish, so I try to keep it up. But
nice.
The telenovelas are like, they're so easy for me to follow along because the language is so very pop culture-y, you know, like it's everyday language that I would hear on the street. Well, maybe not, hopefully not, you know, with all the lovers, but
right.
In any case, yeah. So that's,
I'm always
sorry, I digress. So I want to go back to your teacher because you said you loved that first class that you took and you had a great teacher and you really loved the class. Do you think had you had a not so great teacher or a teacher who just didn't give a shit, would that you have still felt the same way?
I don't know. That's a good question. I fortunately always had really good Spanish teachers in high school. And I begged my mom. There was like a program where you could host a foreign exchange student.
Oh, yes.
And I was like, Mom, please, we have to. And my mom was in like not necessarily the position to invite someone like another into the household. Like, we were two girls, single mom, and but she did for me. And we had a girl come live with us from Colombia, and so that was a really interesting exchange. But then I started taking Spanish classes. Once I moved to Portland, I went to community college and I took Spanish classes there, and I did terrible because I didn't like the teachers. I didn't like the class setting. I didn't like having to participate for a grade, and I still don't. I'm in grad school now, and I'm like, I hate that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I don't need to I don't like that kind of like needing to prove myself in front of my peers and stuff. I just like to do the work and learn. It's for me, not for everyone else, so right. I feel like that's kind of weird, but I did have that experience in community college, and I ended up dropping out and needing to work. I worked at the Gap and had to do that full time instead of school. So I think the teacher 100%, not 100%, maybe a large percentage definitely had an effect on my drive to want to keep
even
learning
the introduction.
more.
I do believe like in the first moment that you're introduced to something new, if it's a good experience, then sure you're going to get curious is what's going to happen. And then that curiosity is going to drive you to try and continue. I wish that I would have been a little more strategic, and I didn't know this at the time, but the way I introduced my daughter. So both of my kids have different fathers. My daughter was 6 when I don't know if that's when we actually married, but when I took her to Spain for the first time. And she and I went early, and we stayed for 2.5 months, and we were staying with family who didn't speak English, and we were just living in the life. She didn't know a lick of Spanish, nor did I. Knew very basic, like I could speak to a 2-year-old in Spanish really well.
Right.
But that was kind of it. So we went to Spain. She became fluent in like 6 weeks with an accent. We ended up spending the first 2 weeks we were there in the south of Spain, which is not where they live. They live in Madrid. But we were down there first, and we were staying with extended family who didn't speak English again. And so she had this accent So this little 6-year-old blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl who, like, when we went to Madrid, she would have conversations